So on the heels of the leaked Michael Cohen tape, President Trump today called a hastily convened Rose Garden news conference with the head of the EU after saying this about the EU just yesterday.
The European Union is doing to us is incredible. How bad? They made $151 billion last year, our trade deficit. I said, you have to change. They didn't want to change. I said, okay, good. We're going to tariff your cars. They said, when can we show up? When can we be there? Would tomorrow be okay?
And tomorrow it was. They showed up today. And all of that happened during the grilling of Secretary Mike Pompeo. Democrats asking incredulously how the president could possibly meet alone with Vladimir Putin, despite the fact that, as Rand Paul pointed out, Putin has met one-on-one with the last 3 U.S. presidents. Ben Shapiro here on all of the day's big headlines tonight. But we begin with Trace Gallagher on the latest fallout from those bombshell Michael Cohen recordings. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. Let's begin with what we know. The recorded conversation between then-candidate Donald Trump and his attorney Michael Cohen is about buying the rights to the story of an alleged affair between Trump and Playboy model Karen McDougal. At the time, the story belonged to American media, which owns the National Enquirer. Here are the last 9 seconds of the tape. Listen closely.
When it comes time for the financing, which will be...
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So no. I got no.
We normally put the words on the screen, but the tape is garbled and impossible to verbate, and that's the primary issue. Exactly what did Donald Trump say? The White House and Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani maintain Mr. Trump said, quote, don't pay with cash. Michael Cohen's attorney Lanny Davis, who gave the tape to CNN, indicates that Trump wanted to pay with cash. Davis even went on to say that only drug dealers and mobsters pay with cash, but the Washington Post, ABC, and NBC, not exactly Trump-loving media outlets, all agree the exact wording on the tape is unintelligible. Today, the president tweeted, quote, what kind of lawyer would tape a client? So sad. Is this a first? Never heard of it before. Why was the tape so abruptly terminated, cut, while I was presumably saying positive things? I hear there are other clients and many reporters that are taped. Can this be so? Too bad. Politico then ran a story saying the president was suggesting the audio had been edited or doctored, except the president suggested no such thing. He simply asked why the tape was abruptly terminated, and there is a big difference between doctoring a tape and not playing the whole thing. And as to the president's question about why a lawyer would tape his client, Lanny Davis was asked about that on Good Morning America. Watch.
Michael Cohen has an answer to why he taped conversations, and I think he'll have to give that answer himself. I can't reveal that.
But Davis did reveal there are more tapes, and they apparently will be released very soon. And regardless of what was said on this tape, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz and the publication Law and Order both agree Mr. Trump did nothing illegal. And we should note the transaction to buy the Playboy model story from American media never happened. Martha.
Fascinating. Trace, thank you very much. All right, to talk about this and all of it, really, that happened this afternoon and a head-spinning day, Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, joins me with a look at all of it. Ben, good to see you tonight. Thank you very much for being with us. I want to get to the trade issue, which I think was fascinating. It was a very hard pivot from the White House and a hastily convened news conference, as we just said, and very big news. So I want to get to that in just a moment. But let's start with the tape from last night. Alan Dershowitz, as Trace just pointed out, said that setting up a corporation for payment is fine. It happens all the time. And he pointed out that the payment was never actually made. But Judge Napolitano said this morning on our air that what they are discussing is a civil fraud and could be problematic for the president. How do you see it?
Well, the possibility of a campaign finance violation is really the serious question here. Did President Trump hand cash to Michael Cohen to pay off the publishers of the National Enquirer in order to help his campaign? That's really the basic question. And there are a lot of dots there that still have to be connected. We haven't seen any money pass hands. We don't know exactly if the money did pass hands, how it passed hands. We don't know even if Trump paid off the National Enquirer, whether it had to do with the election or not, because that's really a matter of opinion. And so is any of this really going to damage President Trump? I think not. I think this is all baked into the cake for President Trump. More than that, I think it's very difficult to actually criminally prosecute these types of cases. John Edwards, of course, the Democratic presidential contender in 2008, he had a very similar issue. He was actually tried, and there's a hung jury. The charges ended up falling apart. It's difficult to think that this is going to be the thing that Democrats hope it is, which is, of course, the kill shot with regard to the presidency.
Yeah, here is a quick montage of some of the reaction to this news that Michael Cohen was flipping, as they put it. Watch.
This is the president's fixer. He knows everything, and if he flips, forget about it.
Michael Cohen has now flipped on Donald Trump.
He could flip and be of value to the feds.
Glee all across the board. And what difference does it make in the end, in your opinion, Ben?
Well, it's a lot of wishful thinking. We're not going to know what Michael Cohen has until he actually shows what he has. I think at this point, he's sort of signaling to prosecutors that he has a lot simply because he would like to get off the hook. And the only way they cut a deal with him is if he has a lot here. But I'm not actually sure that he has very much. Again, the fact that the president has probably paid off a number of these types of cases before actually helps the president when it comes to the legal case.
All right. In terms of what we saw this afternoon, because as I said, there was sort of a rush this afternoon, a call for all of the reporters to come to the Rose Garden. They set up the two podiums. They were not expecting a bilat with the head of the EU, Jean-Claude Juncker, who looked, mildly happy, I guess, to be there. But the president has said that, that they're giving us such a raw deal. Do you think that it sounds like the president got a good deal here?
Well, it sounds like trade war averted. The fact is that the best thing that the economy can hope for is no trade war. It sounds right now like the Europeans are making some relatively moderate to minor concessions and that the United States is going to back off its weapons with regard to tariffs, although it's not clear. Maybe the president wants to keep in place these steel tariffs and aluminum tariffs. It's frankly, I just don't know at this point until we actually see the formal wording of the details. And until we see that, we're going to not know whether the president made a good deal here or a bad deal here. It is pretty clear, though, that the direction that everybody wants to move is in the direction of free trade and not toward more tariffs. And that in and of itself is a good signal, I think. That's why the market's jumped.
One of the things that I find interesting is that, we had the globalists at the White House who were fretting so deeply over the potential for trade war, which I guess may indeed still happen. And as you say, we sort of need to see how all of this works out. But when you hear that, the EU is now going to be buying more soybeans, that obviously is a hope to keep the farmers happy here in the United States, that there aren't going to be any escalations in auto tariffs, at least not right now. I mean, it seems that this is the way the president does everything. He lays down this huge marker, sort of scares everybody that he's going to, be so dramatic with these tariffs that it's going to cause a colossal trade war. And now, as he says, you've got the EU like, OK, we can come to the White House tomorrow, actually, and they're going to buy an enormous amount of liquefied natural gas, which is terrible news for Russia.
I mean, the fact is that the most plausible possible read of the president's behavior is that this is all planned out. It's also possible that he just says a lot of stuff about tariffs and the other side gets scared and then they make a deal. However it works out, whoever you want to give credit to, the bottom line is if the deal is good, the president gets credit for the deal. Once we find out what's in the deal, he's going to get either full credit or full blame for whatever ends up happening.
All right. In terms of Russia, the meeting now moved to next year at the earliest. And as I said, the moves on the missile front, on liquefied natural gas, all of this is not good news for Russia. So all of these things almost feel in some ways like the president is really bending over backwards now to prove that he will not do anything that would look as if he is kowtowing to Russia in any way.
Well, the fact is there's always been a disconnect between President Trump's specific personal rhetoric with regard to Russia and his administration's policy with regard to Russia. And that sort of reared its head again this week when the president was very complimentary of Vladimir Putin over the last week and a half. And his administration continued to strengthen various sanctions against the Russians. They continued to provide deadly weaponry to the Ukrainians. The administration said they're not going to recognize the Russian seizure of Crimea as legitimate. So all of this suggests either that the president is sort of playing both sides, that he's carrying a big, he's speaking loudly and then he is, essentially doing the opposite in order to promulgate a particular policy, or that the president says stuff and then the administration cleans it up for him. Either way, the outcome is basically the same.
All right. Another topic I want to ask you about is this story today about shadow banning and whether or not certain conservatives are having their Twitter feed shadow banned. Now, this is an idea that's been around for a while. But first of all, why don't you explain to everybody what shadow banning is and how it works?
So shadow banning can be done a couple of different ways on Twitter, at least the allegations go. One of the allegations is that if you tweet something, that it just doesn't show up in people's feed, that even if they're following you, it doesn't show up in their feed because Twitter has essentially downgraded the content that you're tweeting about. The other way that it shows up is you go to search for somebody's account online, and it doesn't automatically fill in the rest of the account in the top of the Twitter search bar. That's actually been well substantiated. Vice News, which is not a right-wing outlet, says that this is happening on a routine basis to a lot of folks on the right side of the aisle, but almost never to people on the left side of the aisle. People have a right to be suspicious about the Twitter trends and how Twitter operates its business. They're not transparent when it comes to their logarithms. And because of that, because they're not transparent with regard to the algorithms, it means that any sort of perceived bias is going to be exacerbated tenfold. And even Jack Dorsey is the head of Twitter. He's acknowledged as much. He says, like, I understand why you guys don't trust me. We're going to have to do better. Well, the only way they're going to do better is if they come fully clean with the American people on how exactly they operate.
Questions have been raised about Ronna McDaniel's account, the head of the RNC, Donald Trump Jr. I saw Sarah Carter, the reporter, suggesting today that, you know, some of what she was sending out there was not being seen. And it's so, I mean, if this is true, it's so surreptitious. The idea that you could be tweeting something and thinking that you're putting it out there, but they're blocking it so that you don't know that it's not out there, but no one is seeing it. So they're trying to basically quench your voice over time and beat you down so that nobody is seeing what you're putting out there anymore. And then they don't listen to you anymore, ultimately.
Well, this is one of the serious problems with social media generally, is that there's just no transparency from the user end. I mean, sometimes they'll change how exactly the information is accessed, and they don't notify you about it. It's not like they say, okay, well, now we've downgraded particular content. You just don't see it anymore. That sort of control from above ought to scare anyone who's engaging in social media.
Ben Shapiro, always good to see you. Thank you very much.
You too.
Have a good night.